I am Muhammad Ali, and I'm going to tell you about the night that changed everything. March 8th, 1971. The night I fought Joe Frazier in what they called the fight of the century. It was the first time I had ever been truly tested, the first time I had ever been knocked down, and the first time I learned what it really meant to fight for more than just a championship belt. Let me take you back to the beginning, to understand why this fight meant so much more than boxing. In 1967, at the peak of my career, I was stripped of my heavyweight title, not because I lost in the ring, but because I refused to go to Vietnam. I said no to the draft, and they took everything away from me: my title, my license, my livelihood. For 3.5 years, I couldn't fight professionally. 3.5 years of my prime, gone. During that time, Joe Frazier won the title that was rightfully mine. Now, don't get me wrong, Joe was a great fighter, probably the hardest puncher I ever faced. But the world knew, and Joe knew, that he was keeping my seat warm. I was still the people's champion, the real champion. And when I finally got my license back in 1970, there was only one fight that mattered. The buildup to that fight was unlike anything boxing had ever seen. This wasn't just about who was the better fighter. This was about everything: race, politics, the war in Vietnam, what it meant to be a black man in America. Joe and we represented two different sides of that conversation. I'll be honest with you, I said some things about Joe that I later regretted. I called him names, things I shouldn't have said. I painted him as an Uncle Tom, said he was fighting for the white establishment. It wasn't fair to Joe, and it hurt him deeply. But I was young, I was angry about what they had done to me, and I thought I needed to create that story, that narrative, to get the people behind me. Joe took it personally, and I don't blame him. Here was a man who came from nothing, son of sharecroppers from South Carolina, worked in a slaughterhouse in Philadelphia, fought his way up from the bottom. He deserved better than what I gave him, but that's what made the fight so intense, so personal. We weren't just fighting for a title, we were fighting for our very souls. The night of the fight, Madison Square Garden was electric like I had never felt before. 20,000 people packed in there, but it felt like the whole world was watching. And they were. Over 300 million people tuned in worldwide. Frank Sinatra was there taking pictures for Life magazine. Burt Lancaster was doing commentary. Every celebrity you could think of was at ringside. But when I walked into that ring, all the noise, all the cameras, all the hype, it all disappeared. It was just me and Joe, 20 feet of canvas between us, and 15 rounds to settle everything. From the opening bell, I knew this was going to be different. Joe wasn't like the other fighters I had faced. He didn't care about my speed, didn't care about my jabs, didn't care about my dancing. He just kept coming forward like a machine, that left hook cocked and ready to fire. I controlled the early rounds with my jab, moving around the ring, making Joe miss, making him look clumsy. That's what I was good at, making good fighters look ordinary. But Joe was patient. He knew what he was doing. Every round he was getting closer, cutting off the ring, wearing me down with body shots. By the middle rounds, I could feel the difference. This wasn't the same Muhammad Ali who had dominated Sonny Liston and Floyd Patterson. 3.5 years away from the ring had taken something from me. My legs weren't as quick, my reflexes weren't as sharp, and Joe could sense it. The turning point came in the 11th round. I was backed into a corner, and Joe caught me with that left hook of his, the same hook that had put so many other fighters on the canvas. It rocked me like I had never been rocked before. My knees buckled, and for a moment I thought I might go down right there. But I held on, covered up, and survived the round. That's when I knew I was in a real fight. This wasn't going to be one of those nights where I could coast to victory on pure talent. Joe was testing every part of me: my chin, my heart, my will to win. The 13th and 14th rounds were brutal. We were both exhausted, both hurt, but neither of us was willing to give an inch. Joe's left eye was swelling shut from my jabs, but he kept coming. My jaw was aching from his hooks, but I kept dancing, kept fighting back. Then came the 15th round, the round that would haunt me for years. I came out determined to win that final round, to leave no doubt about who was the better man. But Joe had other plans. About 2 minutes into the round, I was moving to my left when Joe stepped forward and threw that left hook with everything he had left in him. I saw it coming, but I couldn't get out of the way fast enough. The punch caught me flush on the right side of my jaw, and I felt my legs give out underneath me. For the first time in my professional career, I was going down. When I hit that canvas, it felt like the whole world stopped. The crowd, which had been so loud all night, went silent for a moment. I looked up at the lights of Madison Square Garden, and for just a second, I wondered if this was how it would end. But I got up. Of course I got up. I had never stayed down for a 10 count in my life, and I wasn't about to start then. My jaw was throbbing, my legs were unsteady, but I got to my feet and finished the round. When that final bell rang, I knew. I knew I had lost. You can always tell. It's in the way the other fighter's corner celebrates. It's in the way your own corner looks at you with those worried eyes. Joe had won, and he had won clearly. The decision was unanimous. All three judges scored it for Joe. I had suffered my first professional defeat, and it stung more than any punch Joe had landed all night. Not because I had lost, but because of what it meant. For the first time in my career, someone had proven they were better than me when it mattered most. After the fight, both Joe and I were taken to the hospital. My jaw was swollen so badly I could barely speak. Joe's face looked even worse. His eyes were nearly swollen shut, and he would be hospitalized for weeks. We had both left everything in that ring. But you know what the strange thing was? Even though I had lost, even though my jaw was broken and my pride was wounded, I felt a kind of respect for Joe that I had never felt before. He had beaten me fair and square, and he had taken everything I could give him and more. That fight changed both of us forever. People like to talk about how I was never quite the same fighter after that night, how Joe took something out of me that I never got back. And maybe there's truth to that, but Joe was never the same either. That fight took something out of him too. We had pushed each other to places that no human being should have to go. The aftermath was almost as brutal as the fight itself. The press, which had been so supportive of my comeback, suddenly turned on me. They said I was finished, that the layoff had ruined me, that I would never be champion again. It was the lowest point of my career. But that's what made what happened next so sweet, because I didn't stay down. Just like I got up from Joe's left hook in the 15th round, I got up from that defeat and fought my way back to the top. 3 years later, Joe and I fought again at the same Madison Square Garden. This time, I was ready for him. I had learned from that first fight, adapted my style, and I won a clear decision. The next year, we fought for the third and final time in Manila, the Thrilla in Manila. And I won again, though it nearly killed both of us. But it all started with that first fight, that fight of the century in 1971. It was the night I learned that being great isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every time you do. Looking back on it now, I realize that losing to Joe Frazier was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It taught me humility. It taught me respect for my opponents. It taught me that in boxing, as in life, you can't take anything for granted. Joe and I, we never became friends after our fighting days were over. The things I said before our fights, the way I treated him, it left scars that never fully healed. And I regret that. Joe was a great fighter and a good man, and he deserved better from me. But what we created together in those 3 fights, especially that first one in 1971, was something special. It was boxing at its highest level, 2 men pushing each other beyond their limits, showing the world what human beings are capable of when everything is on the line. That night at Madison Square Garden, we weren't just fighting for a championship belt. We were fighting for our place in history, for our right to be remembered as great. And in the end, both of us achieved that. The fight made both of us legends. People ask me all the time about that left hook, about getting knocked down for the first time. They want to know what it felt like, if I was embarrassed, if it broke my spirit. The truth is, getting knocked down by Joe Frazier was one of the most important moments of my career. It showed me that I was human, that I could be hurt, that I wasn't invincible. But it also showed me that I had heart, that when push came to shove, when everything was on the line, I would get back up and keep fighting. That's what champions do. That's what separates the great ones from everybody else. The fight of the century wasn't just about boxing. It was about America in 1971. Divided by war, divided by race, divided by politics. Joe and I became symbols of those divisions, whether we wanted to or not. But in that ring, for those 15 rounds, none of that mattered. All that mattered was who could fight harder, who wanted it more, who could survive. Joe wanted it more that night. He was hungrier, more determined, more willing to pay the price for victory. He deserved to win, and he fought like a champion. I learned more about myself in that defeat than I had in all my previous victories combined. That fight taught me that losing doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. And sometimes being human is more important than being perfect. Joe Frazier showed me that on March 8th, 1971, and I'll always be grateful to him for that lesson, even if it took me years to understand it. The fight of the century was exactly that. The fight that defined a century, a generation, a sport. And I was proud to be a part of it, win or lose. Because sometimes the fights you lose are just as important as the ones you win. That's what Joe Frazier taught me. That's what that night at Madison Square Garden was all about. And that's why, even though he knocked me down, even though he beat me, I'll always consider Joe Frazier one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. Because it takes greatness to bring out greatness, and Joe brought out the best in me, even when I was at my worst. The fight was over, but our story was just beginning. Because great fighters, true champions, they don't let one fight define them. They learn, they grow, they come back stronger. And that's exactly what I did.